Hello, YouTubers. Joe Kersey here at, Wednesday, July 3rd, the day before Independence Day, at 4:40 in the afternoon Eastern Time. Now, I've got two stories I'll tell you here in a little bit, but to, we haven't really been doing too much today. Since I last talked to y'all, I think on the 29th of June, things have been basically benign. What I have basically been actively trying to do is to avoid do anything. Well, except read and horse with this machine. I guess I should say horse with this machine, since that takes most of the time, and then a little bit of reading. Much to my shame. I knew it would be this way. That was that. Now, I am going to mow tomorrow because I actually, on the way back from church group today, stopped in at the corner house, and even I can't walk around in the grass. So, if I can't walk in there around in the grass, I guess I need to do something about it. Now, Paul's off today and tomorrow, so, should I fall off the tractor or be, struck down by, whatever sort of entity or powers that are out there, maybe he can have somebody come scoop me up and do something about it. So we'll see. Anyway, that's in the offing for tomorrow. Assuming there is a tomorrow. One day there won't be, will there? So, I got thinking about, on July 1st, I was standing out on the back porch, on the back deck there, and I thought, well, this is probably the absolute worst day to be in the hospital. Well, June 30th and July 1st are the absolute worst days to be in the hospital. Because on June 30th, all of the residents, and interns, the people who are finishing, anyway, basically all of the staff in training, the doctors in training, well, they're docs. They've got their, they've got their degrees, and in some states they have their full licenses, but they're training. They're learning how to do their craft, their trade, so to speak. And to be, as they say nowadays, providers, healthcare providers. What a bunch of nonsense. Anyway, so in June 30th, these guys are getting ready to hit the sill. Go somewhere else or have a different role. And then in July 1st, you've got guys coming in that are, just out of medical school, generally. Well, it used to be. Yes, I'm sure it's still pretty much that way. Now, they may be considerably older than the guys that I went in with. I mean, there were a lot of guys that were slightly older. In their mid-20s when I was, mid or late 20s even when I was in medical school going into this. But, they'd finish in their mid or late 20s. But, I was somewhat unusual in that I had graduated from medical school when I was 23. But, there weren't too many people much older than 27. And those are the people that had master's degrees and so forth, or who had been applied for a number of years to various places. Well, that happens. And so on July 1st, you've got this wave of people who essentially don't know what the heck's going on. They don't know the routine of the hospital. They don't know which nurse is a good nurse, which nurse is a bad nurse, which nurse is pleasant to work with, which nurse is just a nightmare to work. You just don't know. You don't know, and that all affects patient care. You get, you know, and they don't know the patients. They come in just dead flat out. Nobody's briefed them. Well, sometimes they have, but a lot of times they haven't. You just come in cold on these people, you know. Now, admittedly, the patients aren't in the hospital very long anymore, so which makes it even harder for them to actually learn anything about medicine based on taking care of these very fleeting patients. I mean, when I was doing this in 75, 78, particularly in my surgery year, 75, 76, I mean, well, when I was a student, I mean, you know, the clinical years were from 73 to 75, we had people in there for weeks. Well, certainly, yes, weeks. You don't do that today, and nor would you need to, but there's nothing like seeing the full evolution of an operation over a period of weeks when you're going into the room, you know, 3 or 4 times a day and changing the dressing and talking to them and, you know, mashing on them and going, that's how you learn. That's how you learn, you know, and that experience isn't out there now, I don't think, which is a shame. But in any case, I want to tell you 2 stories. And the first story is about when I was a student. Now, I was a student, medical student. Now, I had been, you know, on the clinics. They call them the clinics, you know, where you do rotations in various medical, you know, things. Started that in October of 1973. And this took place in July of 1974. Now, I had just finished a month on the cardiology service in June of 1974. And then I was going to do a month on the pulmonary service in July of 1974. Now, this was in Means Hall at Ohio State, which was still one of the very last, well, one part of that hospital was one of the very last tuberculosis wards in the United States at that time. And so we had probably 20, 25 tuberculosis patients in there, you know, who were actively spewing out the red snappers, you know, Mycobacterium, you know, tuberculosis, step. They call them red snappers because when you stain them and look at them under a microscope, they look like little red rods, hence red snappers. And as it turned out, one of my jobs was to go in and get gastric aspirin, because a lot of times you couldn't get this out of sputum. You know, they cough a lot, obviously. They got TB. But, you know, to bring up that big honker from the cavity that's got red snappers in it, it takes a very special kind of cough, and it's a very random event. So, since a lot of these guys, you know, sort of, you know, cough a little bit and then the cilia sort of move it up, their trachea, then they swallow in their stomach, you do a gastric aspirin. You just drop an NG tube down and then you suck it out. And then you spin it down and then you look at the stuff under a microscope. Well, you stain it and do all the acid-fast staining, which is kind of fun. And then you plate it out. I mean, you have to do a sort of, you know, everybody got plated every day that was considered active. And then they grow it for a while and see if anything grows. And then when, you know, after a few days or weeks, when it hasn't grown anything, then off you go, my lad, you're discharged into the general population. So that was what I did a lot on that ward. But I'm talking about the first day. Before I got to do any of that, we met, generally our student group, when we went to the clinics, we stayed together most of the time. Not a lot, but most time. But this was a group that I had become very familiar with over, the months from October to June. And so anyway, we go in there, and here's this guy. This guy's, the resident, who is a second-year resident as opposed to a third-year resident. This is an internal medicine service. He's smoking one of these meerschaum pipes like you see in Sherlock Holmes movies. This is when you could still smoke in a hospital. That shows you sort of, how far we've come or not come, depending on your point of view about smoking. And then we have this young hotshot from Yale. He had graduated from Yale. And he never lets you forget it either. In fact, he had brought his Yale medical diploma, to stick up. I think he thought there was going to be a nail on the wall in the call room or something, or the lunchroom where he could hang this. But he brought this thing, and he had propped this thing up on top of a file cabinet. It was in Latin. It was all in Latin, Yaleensis, Universitiensis, and all this stuff. This guy thought he was the cock of the ecology walk. He certainly thought he was the cock of something, I'll tell you that. And, well, much as I didn't like, turned out not to like, after a year or two of encountering this resident in other roles as I progressed through my surgery internship and anesthesia residency and so forth. I didn't know him then, so I was keeping an open mind, and it was clear that he just yearned to see this guy, have a bit of a comeuppance. Well, as it turned out, God and human physiology provided several instances, several opportunities of that to happen that day, that July 1st, 1974. Because, no sooner, we had been in sort of, having our little morning meeting, where you talk about patients and expectations for the year or the month or the group or, what the students have to do, what everybody else has to do. Well, there's this big blaring code, somebody's dying right down the hall. So we all swing into action, we all scamper down the hall, and the nurses are running down there with the crash cart, and the students get there first, of course. First of all, this poor guy from Yale didn't know where the room was. Seems he hadn't scouted out the lay of the land ahead of time, and clearly the resident had decided he was going to smoke his pipe and maintain a detached demeanor while he was teaching people how to save lives. What a pompous blowhard. Well, as it turned out, but I didn't know that then. But that day provided plenty of evidence later on. And anyway, the group of students we'd been on cardiology together, the months before. So, we had pumped and thumped on these guys' chests, several times in any given, day, on cardiology. And so we swung into action. Now, we didn't tube them, but one of us was bagging and masking, and I think I was pumping on the chest. Somebody's bagging, masking, and then the anesthesia guys come in. The anesthesia residents on call come in, or one of the staff. Actually, a lot of times the staff guys came in, and they'd throw a tube in, and you'd ventilate the people. And but meanwhile, this Yale newbie was just sort of floundering, and he would look over at the resident. He says, "Watch it." He says, "It's your code. It's your code. It's your service. Run your service." Well, he got 6 other opportunities that day to basically have the same experience. We had 7 people drop dead on. Well, they didn't drop dead. They tried to drop dead. I think we managed to save 2 or 3, probably just 2. You know, these probably weren't good saves either. They're probably like, you know. So there was medicine at Ohio State in 1974, and you know, there's no damn thing wrong with it. I mean, that's you know, these people are getting taken care of properly. So now, so story number 2. When I had finished up, you know, being a medical student and graduated and taken my state medical boards, and in 1975, I was going to start surgery residency at Ohio State on July 1st, 1975. Well, I at least I'd received my rotation schedule from the surgery department, and since I had gone to Ohio State, and I think the other, well, and the other guy, Jeremy, who had gone to Ohio State with me, so we sort of knew the ropes, and so they wanted to start the guys that knew the system at Ohio State on the most difficult service, which was thoracic. At the longest hours, you know, sort of the most demanding personalities of the surgeons, and you know, and we knew these guys. I mean, they knew us. So I mean, it's a good way to start. So I said to myself, well, I don't want to go in there, you know, on a cold. Well, I remembered what I just told you on the previous story. You know, I mean, I didn't want to go in there on a cold, you know, call and just, you know, meet these patients for the first time on July 1st. So I went in there. I actually went in there on June 29th. And now you understand, on June 29th, I wasn't officially employed. You know, I mean, I went in there. I just wanted to go in and look at the charts and maybe make rounds, and and just sort of figure out, you know, what the state of these patients, because I'm going to go in there next, you know, 2 days later and be taking care of these people while all the rest of the people are in the operating room. And, well, as it turns out, they saw a warm body in the room and in the hall and looking at charts, and so they decided I was already there. And so I ended up essentially doing a full half day's work there on the 29th, and then they said, well, you know, now we make rounds at 6 to, you know, in the morning. So I was there, you know, 10 till 6 the next day, and gave them a full day's work. You know, and I say full day's work, I mean I was there till 10:30 at night. And so then, you know, on July 1st, I went in, and well, of course then I knew all the patients, so it wasn't nearly that hard, was it? I just wonder, in all seriousness, and in a non-patronizing way, how that works for guys, well, guys and gals now, you know, primarily guys, I mean gals, I mean there's a majority now, you know, how that works for them, you know, starting out at this particularly critical time of year, both, well, certainly for the patients. I just, you know, there's somebody in our prayer group asked for prayers for some guy just 2 days ago, and said he's going to be operated on maybe on July 5th. Well, that'd be, you know, 2 days from now. And I thought, well, you know, do you really want to be operated on the first week of July in any hospital? You know. Oh gosh. Well, we had Bible group today, and as I thought would happen, our new deacon intern was there. That was good. she's jumping in. She's getting her feet wet. And we actually had a fairly full complement. Of course, we got to hear one of the women read pretty much all of the notes from the Oxford Annotated Bible. And then we got to hear another guy, read from the Good News Bible. Well, it's not really a Bible, it's a paraphrase. It's not a Bible, it's a paraphrase. It's not a translation. And God bless this woman sat next to me, does butter melt in any of these people's mouths? As well, well, she called it a translation. It's not a translation. It's a paraphrase. So your version, yeah, I know I shifted the word, but that she called it translation, but it's, your version. I can't call it. I can't in good conscience call this a translation. Your version is very different. Well, of course it's different from yours. Here, I'll give you an idea. We were doing, Luke sending out the 70, which in Matthew is the apostles, the 12 apostles. 12 disciples. They became apostles after he died. Well, when he was resurrected. Apostles. Well, they were apostles when they were sent out, because that's the meaning of the Greek word apostolos. To send out, be sent out. So the 70. Well, so you got the 70, and then you got the 12, and there's a line. There's a line in there. Don't take any money. Don't wear a belt. Don't wear any shoes. And his little outfit that he read to us. I don't know how this man arranges to read the gospel every week, but he does. And he says, well, his version said, don't wear any shoes, not even sneakers. Now that's kind of like a double whammy. Not only does it combine, a mistranslation, it also combines it with a massive anachronism. So if you're going to have this intellectual, moronic explosion, at least it's a really big moronic explosion. This is a man who's a Greek scholar. This is a man who's a Greek scholar, and he taught Greek at a seminary, a local seminary. And he has chosen this. Now I understand he does a lot of, outreach to prison people, but we're not in prison. We all have postgraduate degrees. Treat us with intellectual respect. It drives me nuts. I've flogged on this before, and I dare say I will again from time to time, but I had to tell you about this July 1st phenomenon, and in the then practice of medicine around the mid-70s. I'm sure to some extent there's a certain amount of truth happening there today in that. So I'm gonna leave y'all. So bye-bye, YouTubers.